Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. We're currently on day 28 of Ukraine's special military operation to liberate the people of Kursk. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainian forces conduct assaults in Russia's Kursk Oblast. Russians report counterattacks. Ukrainian forces carried out multiple assaults on the 1st of September, targeting locations near Suja and Koronevo. And sure enough, when we go to the military map, there was an update. This was August 31st, and this is September 1st. So the gray zone contracted as both the Ukrainians and the Russians are figuring out where the new front lines are. Ukraine did firmly take under control several more Russian villages over here, but the area of the map that Ukraine is focused on is right here. This is Koronevo. The Russians are still in this village, and there's only a single road that can resupply them from the highway in Rilsk. To the west is the Sam River. To the north is open fields and forests. So the Ukrainians are focused on ejecting the remaining Russian forces in this village before they can proceed in other directions. They have to secure this bottleneck as a new defensive line before they can start pushing into the Glushkovo district. We've been talking about this for weeks now, but Ukraine has blown the bridges, and it's estimated that about 3,000 Russian soldiers are trapped in this region. Most of them are conscripts, and they can't be resupplied. So there's no rush. Ukraine is going to secure this village first, and then sweep down on the south bank of this river, filling in this region. This is what's going to occur over the coming weeks, but we just have to wait. And the Russians in Kursk remain incredibly disorganized. There's a lot of chaos and confusion. So last night in the Russian blogosphere, there was this rumor that Ukrainian forces had broken out and were heading towards Kursk. So on the highway, local Russian militiamen just started firing on anybody, both civilians and the Russian military. Here's a post from a Russian military blogger, Roman Saponikov, and he says that Russian civilians with weapons in the combat zone are useless. They do not stop the looters anyways. There's heavy looting occurring in this region, either by Russian soldiers or the militiamen themselves who all have guns. So as soon as they make contact with Ukrainian forces, they run away anyways. They don't actually want to fight. Last night, the so-called Territorial Defense Regiment, having heard about Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance groups heading towards the highway, they just started firing at anything that moved. There were wounded of Russian soldiers. Miraculously, no fatalities for now. This was 12 kilometers from the front line. Good job, Russian militiamen. Putin says the Kursk incursion will not stop the Russian advance in East Ukraine. Ukraine's surprise August 6 incursion into Russia has displaced about 130,000 Russian civilians, and Ukraine now controls parts of the sovereign territory of Russia. So there's a calculation occurring here. President Zelensky is facing political pressure because the Russians are making progress in the Donetsk Oblast, but he says that Russia has not advanced closer to Pokrovsk over the last 2 days. And sure enough, when we go on the military map, these are the changes from the last couple days, and perhaps the new front has stabilized, but once again, the evacuation of this town has to occur because it's now within artillery range. There was a report that 2,000 additional Ukrainian defenders from the Kara Dog Brigade relocated from Zaporizhia to Donetsk. And this morning I saw this video of a Russian APC dropping off infantry, and it's about to be blown up by a tank round. I don't know which tank was used, but I'll link this video down below if you want to see this APC be annihilated, and I think most of these Russian soldiers didn't survive. But this was posted by the Kara Dog Brigade, showing they're now fighting in the Pokrovsk direction. So additional Ukrainian forces have been reallocated to help stabilize the front. But a high-level analysis what happened here? Why was Russia able to make so much progress over the last month, really, towards the town of Kursk? The situation may be puzzling for many, given the recent media focus on Ukraine's genuine success in Kursk. According to General Sursky, one of the goals of the Kursk offensive was to draw Russian forces away from Ukraine, especially the Donbass region. The desired end result didn't happen. Russia has sent units from Ukraine to Kursk, but from less important areas, like Kherson. The offensive didn't yield gains significant enough to force Russia to move their primary objectives for fighting from Pokrovsk to Kursk. Big picture, what's happening here is Putin doesn't care if he loses territory inside of Russia. He believes that, for example, if Donald Trump is elected, the front lines will be forced to be frozen where they currently are, meaning that all territory that Russia has taken in Ukraine, they get to keep forever. But of course, any kind of ceasefire or negotiation or deal being negotiated by Trump isn't going to include territorial concessions from Russia. So Putin has done the calculation, and he thinks if he can continue taking territory in Ukraine, if Trump is elected, he'll get back his territory in Russia anyways. So it's not a priority. He doesn't care. He's not going to sacrifice offensive operations inside of Ukraine to prioritize defensive operations inside of Russia. He's willing to lose more territory if he thinks he can still gain. I now have a lot of bad news concerning Russian terrorism of civilian targets in Ukrainian cities. It's going to get bad. Huge number of ballistic missiles at the same time. Kyiv repels Russian missile barrage targeting the capital. This was 2 nights ago. Another drone and missile attack targeting civilian targets across Ukraine. I can share pictures, I can share videos. An Islamic cultural center in Kyiv was targeted. Hospitals, schools, churches. The Russians also bombed another university. Once again, not a valid military target. And at this point, the Russians know they're not going to win this war. They're not going to take the capital city of Kyiv. So to continue their genocide, they're just trying to get as many shots in as possible, destroying hospitals, destroying schools, universities, churches, mosques, whatever. There are videos. I'll link these down below if you want to see firsthand what the destruction looks like of Ukraine's educational centers. The goal is to stop Ukrainians from educating their children, their language, their culture, their history, anything that disputes the Russian propaganda narrative. This video I do want to share. The Russians deliberately bombed the Danish and Norwegian humanitarian church headquarters. This is one of their workers in front of their headquarters giving a report.
So I'm standing in front of the headquarters of the Danish Church Aid, the Norwegian Church Aid. This building was completely destroyed the early hours of this morning by Russian missile attack, and it's a very sad thing for Denmark, because we have a very close partnership with the Danish Church Aid. They're working hard to bring about help to Ukraine, both in terms of demining and other humanitarian activities. This attack will only strengthen the resolve of Denmark to support Ukraine in its fight for freedom.
The Russians are deliberately attacking humanitarian centers, church groups. It gets worse. It's going to get worse. Russian missile strike hits Sumy orphanage and residential area, injuring 13, including 2 children. The Russians deliberately targeted and bombed an orphanage. So there's outrage, and I want to share this tweet from the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. Her name is Bridget Brink. Here's what she said on Twitter. Russia attacked Ukrainian civilians today in Kharkiv with ballistic missiles and aerial glide bombs. 44 people were injured, including 7 children, due to start school tomorrow. The United States condemns this and every attack on Ukraine by Russia. So this statement has people upset. People like General Ben Hodges. Please, no more condemnations, since it doesn't appear the administration is serious about actually doing anything. These condemnations are like the meaningless thoughts and prayers that NRA supporters offer after mass shootings in the United States. Words are cheap. People around the world want to see action. It gets worse. At least 49 dead, 219 injured in Russian army missile strike on Poltava. Dozens were killed and injured in what President Zelensky described as one of the deadliest strikes by Russian forces since the start of the full-scale war. Poltava is located north of Dnipro and west of Kharkiv. And the Russians chose to target the Poltava Institute of Communications with 2 ballistic missiles, killing 41 civilians and injuring another 180. This happened this morning. The pictures and videos are hitting the internet right now. They're horrific. And if this was any other European country, any other European city, 41 dead, 180 wounded in a terrorist attack on a school, this would be the #1 news story in the world. But because it's the Russians, and they've been doing this for 2.5 years, mainstream media isn't even paying attention. Here's the statement from President Zelensky. I received preliminary reports on the Russian strike in Poltava. According to available information, 2 ballistic missiles hit the area. They targeted an educational institution and a nearby hospital, partially destroying one of the telecommunications institute's buildings. People were trapped under the rubble. Many people were rescued, but more than 180 were injured. Unfortunately, there are many casualties. As of now, we know that 41 people were killed. My deepest condolences to all of their relatives and loved ones. I ordered a full and prompt investigation into all the circumstances of what happened. All necessary services are involved in the rescue operation. I'm grateful to everyone who has been helping and saving lives from the very first moments of the strike. The Russian scum will surely pay for this strike. We continue to urge everyone in the world who has the power to stop this terror. Ukraine needs air defense systems and missiles now, not sitting in storage. Long-range strikes that can protect us from Russian terror are needed now, not later. Every day of delay, unfortunately, means more lost lives. So let me share with you another statement, this time the U.S. mission to NATO. The United States will stand with the people of Ukraine until they prevail. Russia will never succeed in Ukraine, and the spirit of the Ukrainian people will never be broken. These are words. Not air defense systems, not long-range missiles, they're just words. So here's General Ben Hodges again. Please stop. No more thoughts and prayers tweets. Constantly saying that we stand with Ukraine while actually only standing there is ruining all the goodwill and trust we earned in the early days. If you're a representative of the US government and you don't want to do anything more, anything additional, just stop talking. These thoughts and prayer tweets don't comfort anyone. So here's the debate. Here's the fight happening this week. Ukraine has not received necessary weapons to conduct required long-range strikes deep into Russia. I think as soon as Ukraine crossed the border into Russia, the United States stopped providing Ukraine with ATACMS out of fear they would use them without permission. I don't think Zelensky would do that, but the United States is taking precautions. So kudos to this reporter. I want to give him a shout out, Alex Rafagulu. And he managed to get a question to President Biden as Biden was getting off his helicopter. And he asked him, will there be a change in policy about U.S. weapons striking deeper into Russia?
Mr. President, on Ukraine, have you seen Ukraine's request to lift restrictions on American weapons so they can strike back on Russian bases?
You might not have been able to hear him because of the helicopter, but he said, "I made it clear what we support and don't support." That was a terrible answer. So here's the honest truth about what's happening right now in American politics. We're having an election in 2 months, and I'm convinced that National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and President Joe Biden has made the decision to not make any more decisions. Either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris will become the new president. And there's just too much uncertainty at the moment to do anything that might change the current status quo. Jake Sullivan and Joe Biden don't want Russia to use a nuke in the next 2 months, and they don't want Russia to collapse in the next 2 months. They don't want any kind of geopolitical destabilizing event that Donald Trump could take advantage of and then used to get elected in November. So I know people are upset, people are frustrated. I do want to say that I am confident that things will be different after the November election. We will know who will have the majority in Congress. If MAGA controls the speakership, they can just permanently block votes on military aid like they did for 8 months last year. Donald Trump winning is a nightmare scenario for Ukraine as well. But I do want to say, when Kamala Harris wins in November, she's going to start making cabinet announcements. She's going to pick her new national security team. Department of Defense, NSA, CIA, National Security Advisor. And we're going to know really fast how aggressive she might be in her policies towards Russia. If she picks someone, for example, like General Ben Hodges to be her national security advisor or Secretary of Defense or whatever, then we'll know what's coming in January when she takes over. The converse is true as well. If she picks people or starts announcing people for her cabinet who have weak statements on Ukraine or no statements on Ukraine, that'll be a bad sign. But we're not going to know until November. So I do want to mention this. The US may transfer long-range JASSM missiles to Ukraine, but a decision is expected this fall, with delivery possibly a few months later. JASSMs are cruise missiles, the American equivalent to a Storm Shadow or a Scalp. They'll be fired from F-16s. This is a long-range strike capability that I'm convinced Biden is just going to wait till November and then allow his successor to make that decision. I know this is not the answer people want to hear. As an American, I'm going to do everything I can to put pressure on my governments to act sooner. We don't have 60 days to wait around for decisions to be made, given that hospitals and schools and orphanages and churches are being blown up today. The election's in 62 days. Please only vote for people who strongly support Ukraine, if you're American. Let's get to the bad news for Russia. Firefighters extinguish oil depot blaze in southern Russia 2 weeks after drone strike. I mentioned this in my last video that it looked like it was out, but we now have the satellite images. This is August 16th, right before, and this is September 2nd. So in total, 30 of these oil containers blew up and went up in smoke, so huge losses for the Russians. Massive drone attack on Russia. 2 power stations and an oil refinery were damaged. 16 regions targeted. So this was Ukraine's strike happening 2 days ago. 150 Ukrainian drones successfully targeted 16 regions, including Moscow. And for the first time, Ukraine went after Russia's coal-burning power plants. Russia has been doing this to Ukraine for almost 2 years, and Ukraine didn't want to do this because these are civilian infrastructure. They would rather go after valid military targets, but with Russia targeting the dam in Kyiv, they hit it with a ballistic missile. I think that was a red line for Ukraine, and Ukraine is now willing to do this. Go after Russian power plants. So this is the Konakova power plant just outside of Moscow. We do have a video showing some of the damage and looks pretty bad. I'm not an expert. I don't know how bad it is, but I'll link this clip down below and the experts will continue to look at the footage. Kyiv drones force a shutdown of Moscow Oil Refinery. This is the Europlus unit. Gazprom Neft's Moscow Oil Refinery halted its key Europlus crude oil processing after a large-scale drone attack. Reuters reports that this Moscow oil refinery has suspended operations after the drone attack on Sunday. And from the videos, the damage doesn't look too severe. But Ukraine knew exactly where to hit it. Oil refineries are full of sensitive and complicated equipment, and if anything's not working properly, the entire place can catch fire or explode. So they've been forced to halt operations until repairs can be made. And this single oil refinery has a refining capacity of about 6 million metric tons of oil per year. And it's now offline going into this winter. So let's zoom out and think about the big picture. Here's a post from Tatarigami. He's a former Ukrainian officer. One of the most frequently raised questions following Ukraine's strikes on industrial or oil infrastructure is, how will this lead to a victory for Ukraine? The answer is straightforward. Viewed in isolation, each individual action, be it sanctions on a specific Russian bank, the liberation of a small village, or the destruction of a single oil refinery, does not win the war by itself. Victory is achieved through a series of operational successes, each built upon tactical victories. When neither side can secure a clear and decisive victory, such as capturing the enemy's capital and changing the government, the war shifts into a phase where endurance, willpower, social fatigue, and resourcefulness are tested. Incremental changes, while seemingly minor in the moment, can eventually lead to significant shifts. The impact of each action might not be immediately visible, but every effort that undermines Russian economic stability and its capacity to sustain the war contributes to Ukraine's broader strategic advantage. Predicting which action will be the tipping point is almost impossible, but the decisive effect of the final drop relies on the cumulative impact of all preceding actions. It's the old parable, the straw that broke the camel's back. How much can Russia endure? With all these oil depots and refineries and now their thermal power plants being knocked offline. We're not going to know until this winter. Ukraine has to get through the next 6 months, and we'll see how bad it is for Russia, when I don't think anyone economically is going to risk themselves to save the Russians this winter. Ukrainian forces also successfully destroyed another Russian S300 air defense system. If you want to see it go boom, I'll link it down below. Deputy Commander of Leningrad Military District arrested on bribery charges. Putin continues to clean house and make examples of Russian generals who steal too much. Some level of corruption, of course, has to be allowed. That's how Putin maintains his loyalty. But when it's so egregious, or it's causing Russia to lose this war, Putin is now making examples of these Russian generals. This is not good news for Ukraine. We want to keep these corrupt and incompetent military leaders in place. But you would think Russian society would look at these headlines. Their own military officers every other day almost being arrested. And you might actually think it's a conspiracy. Like, it's not just one bad apple when you've already arrested dozens. It might be the whole system, Russia. If you're an ordinary Russian citizen, maybe you can piece that together. Here's a story that's getting a lot of international attention. Putin arrives in Mongolia, his first visit to an ICC member since his arrest warrant. So Mongolia is a signatory to the Rome Statute. They're bound by international law to arrest anyone who has an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court. But they're not going to do that. Let me first play you the video of Putin getting off the plane in Mongolia. So the ICC and Ukraine asked Mongolia, would you please arrest Vladimir Putin? And the Mongolians said no. Mongolia's reluctance to arrest Putin is a major setback for international law. So I'm actually going to defend Mongolia just a little bit. I know people are upset. But Mongolia actually is a democracy. This is their Freedom House rating score, and they get an 84 out of 100. That's pretty good. And Mongolia is a tiny country. Not geographically. Geographically, it's the same size as the United States, everything west of the Mississippi River. But it's only 3.3 million people. They only have slightly more people than Lithuania, at 2.8 million. And Mongolia potentially has the worst geography in the world, because they're sandwiched between communist China and fascist Russia. And they're a democracy. So there's this balancing act they have to play between these two superpowers so they don't get invaded and all their people, murdered or annexed. So the Mongolians a couple weeks ago announced that they weren't going to approve this pipeline to China. China's not approved it anyways, but Mongolia was saying they weren't going to allow the transits of the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline through their country. Sure enough, Putin then schedules a visit to go visit Mongolia, and he's probably bringing with him gold bricks to pay off the Mongolians in the event the Chinese actually do want to finance and build a pipeline through Mongolia to Siberia. So should Mongolia be taking Russia's money? Should they be approving this pipeline? Should they have allowed Putin into their country? No, no, and no. But once again, just terrible neighbors, terrible geography. It's an impoverished country, 6 months of winter, mostly desert, and they don't want to be invaded by China. So the Mongolians historically have always had to be friendly to the Russians or the Soviets so that China doesn't steal their territory. Not a good situation. Let's now get to the good news for Ukraine. 5,000 laptops from Serbia for Ukrainian children, a pledge of humanity. Serbia has traditionally been Russia's ally, but the last 2 years they've made some interesting decisions, and they have provided educational and humanitarian aid for Ukraine. Thank you so much to the people of Serbia. Romanian government approves a Patriot system donation to Ukraine. This was announced months ago, but I guess the parliament hadn't approved it. Thank you to the people of Romania, but let's try and speed up those air defense deliveries. Germany sends new military aid package to Ukraine, including an Iris-T and aerial and surface drones. Thank you so much to the people of Germany. The Dutch Prime Minister makes a surprise visit to Ukraine and announces a new military aid package. Thank you so much to the Dutch people, but today's final feel-good clip is the Prime Minister of the Netherlands visiting an underground school with President Zelensky in Zaporizhia. This is the video they took together.
Діти, дивіться, до нас завітали. Доброго дня, шановні гості, будь ласка, привітаємо. Вітаємо.
Вам подобається в школі?
Так, ви дуже маленькі, ми тільки прийшли до школи.
Yes.
Minister,
So nice to meet you.
дуже приємно з тобою познайомитися.
Yes, you speak English.
Розмовляєш англійською?
Ще ні. Ми тільки почали. Наш перший день в школі.
Міра.
Мірослава, мир буде у нас.
Буде мир, Мирославочка, буде мир, точно.
Камеру.
Ну, вам, що головне, безпечного навчання.
That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.